The Art of Being Ruled. Wyndham Lewis. Original publication 1926. 1989 edition. Narrated by Skeptical Waves. Part 9. Man and Shaman. Chapter 2. The Propagandist Indictment of the Feminine. Both sides in the sex war are provided with arguments by sex inversion, both the man and woman. There is defeatism, but also a deep racial tendency of withdrawal from the absurd position of heroism that could only end in the extermination of the white race. There is a great deal of the intellectual snob about the invert, but since he converts what he borrows from the intellect to the purposes of sex, he is a great enemy of the intellect. As a feminine facsimile, further, he takes over the traditional idiosyncrasies of the feminine relay, and certainly one of them has always been to be the enemy of the absolute. The natural feminine hostility to the intellect, and a desire to belittle the purely masculine and abstract type of success, he takes over. This type of success and the satisfactions to be obtained from it have always deeply offended the feminine nature. For the stronghold of the male, inaccessible to sexual attack, pure of all that rich and turbulent romance of sexual passion and the utilitarian claims of reproducing the species, has not that always been the abstract region of his work, of the productions of his intelligence and specialized energy? This other world of endeavor into which men have always been able to retire has been deeply offensive to women. Although that Bastille technically has fallen, yet, in the abstract, the intellect, and especially a certain sort of intellect, remains. And of this there is no bitterer enemy than the turncoat, or turnsex, male, feminizing invert. Proust himself is an arch sex mixer, a great democrat, a great enemy of the intellect. For he desires in the deepest way to see everything converted into terms of sex, to have everything and everybody on that violent, scented, cloying, and unreal plane, where there is nothing that cannot be handled, the very substance of illusion sniffed at and tasted by everybody, and put to the uses of sensation. In that world most of the values of the intellect are reversed. Imperial Caesar, dead and turned to clay, was used to stop a hole to keep the wind away. Turned to clay in the other sense, without becoming a corpse, his fate would be a similar one. No man is a hero to his valet, and it is to a world of highly energized, orthodoxly perverted valets, with a great many scores to pay off, that Proust invites society. In this sense he is a great revolutionary figure. But it is one of the more distasteful, treacherous tasks of revolution that can be well left to the Prousts of this world. Nevertheless, his usefulness is undeniable. Il travaille le bien celui-là. His hands are apt at unpicking, if only because they are small, agile, and feminine ones. But, effective as male sex inversion is against the masculine intellect, it is very effective, too, to some extent, against the privileges of women. A man transforming himself into a woman enters into rivalry with women. He affects, naturally, to be a superior sort of woman. And a great deal of the 19th century criticism of woman with which the sex war opened, or which was used to stir it up, is employed by him. The arguments used against the normal procedures of sex by invert or misogynist are somewhat as follows. Sex as arranged by nature is vulgarly advertised, at bottom utilitarian, and the protagonists, the male and the female, are mortal enemies and temperamental opposites. The woman with her haunches and breasts is like an advertisement for some food to build bonny babies. At the best, the over-suave, vulgarly inviting lines of her body a chocolate cream trap to catch a rustic fool are not aesthetically of the same value as the lean, flat idealism of the male adolescent. The woman, the abstract woman against whom this propaganda is directed, is a sex specialist, always thinking about her personal appearance and incapable of any less personal sensations. With her little, earnest, permanently juvenile mask peering at a hat in a shop window, solemn, secretive, and self-conscious, pat-patting like a fantastically decorated automaton up the street, always pretending, never herself or able to forget the world around her, by turns maudlin and vicious, cruel like a child, inconsiderate, with no disciplined sense of fairness, living on her mimetic sense solely, so that no idea or mannerism is her own, but only a reflection of some other personality or of fashion. That is a specimen inventory of the conventional male indictment. Sex, as arranged by nature, it is said, is for nature's famous ends, not ours, and there necessarily is a catch in it. At all costs the bagman, nature, with his, or her, bag, must be circumvented. Sex brings into play our spot qualities, and our most elaborately developed sensibilities are immediately invoked, and cheapened, at the touch of its potato fingers. Some think that all our trumps are involved in its displays, or that all our displays involve it. Is sex a worthy object for the lavishing of all this treasure? Or could not the human symbol, the typical eternal feminine, be improved on? As regards the physique of this symbol, that has been dealt with above. For the rest, her narrow specialist intelligence, her inaptitude for great intellectual adventure, the sterility of her mind, like the potential fecundity of her body, all indispose her for the position that chivalrous poetry allotted her in the teeth of ancient and more brutal usage and good sense. Then she is not only a shallow, but a peculiarly false enemy. Or when the enemy is not being false, the rhetorical Shakespearean epithet, she is being detestably true in the Gretchen sense. Her mind, as it appears in the Schopenhauerian coloring, is full of bibs, bread and butter and jam, beefsteak, rocking horses, and school bills, or, in the Laforgesque sense, smells of iodoform, the nurse's self-sacrificing plain costume, doctor's visits, vases of flowers, and darkened rooms. That was the position of the average enlightened European male contemporary to Schopenhauer, Laforgue, Weiniger, or Wilde. Try as women will to engargoner themselves, to reduce and reduce till they can pass as a diminutive male adolescent, they cannot entirely banish the reflection, in those for whom they perform these feats, that they are nature's agents, imitating their betters by a sleight of hand. Against the woman, as here represented, there is always the classical remedy. And today that panacea, of non-sex or of perverted sex, has been almost universally adopted. That this male indictment of the other sex, on the lips of a male invert, is somewhat inconsistent, is evident. For all his care is directed to imitating this compound of contemptible defects. But still these charges are not forgotten and are often used, for of course it is no valid objection against the use of some slighting epithet that it exactly describes yourself, rather the contrary. It is perhaps no wonder, all things considered, that women are more cowed by the new man than they were by the old. The shamanizing contemporary male, who has changed his sex without the assistance of Arctic hysteria, is now their silken, attentive, caressing friend, and at the same time redoubtable adversary. The relics are reversed and the tables turned. But the non-transformed male is if anything worse off than the woman. It is thus in every sense a drawn battle as between the traditional sex principles opposed in this particular revolution. A Pyrrhic victory is intended, and is achieved.